Tonight we're on assignment in Rome, meeting the Pope's most dangerous critic.
Why is Steve Bannon now taking reforming the Vatican?
Because nobody else has stepped up to do it.
Behave yourself! Behave yourself! You are freaks and animals! You're freaks and animals!
From the beginning, Brietbart has been all about confronting liberals, the media, activists, the political establishment, anyone believed to be shouting down or shutting down conservative voices.
Do you even know what you're protesting? How much are you getting paid?
That's the late Andrew Brietbart, who built the hugely influential right-wing media empire before his unexpected death in 2012. And these are the kind of headlines Brietbart churns out these days. Birth control makes women unattractive and crazy. Gay rights have made us dumber. The site called a conservative columnist a renegade Jew and asked, would you rather your child had feminism or cancer? At the helm for Brietbart News until recently, Steve Bannon.
We need to have a fight in the Republican Party for the soul of the conservative movement.
I agree with you.
He's a former Navy officer, former investment banker, according to Bloomberg, the most dangerous political operative in America, and now advisor to the president.
Look, the media is the Praetorian Guard of the permanent political class. All the consultants that come after you, the political class's consultants, they're all in bed together.
So how did he get there? Early investment in the Seinfeld TV series led Bannon to a wealth of cash and experience in media, which he transformed into political battering rams.
She was sitting at the desk
producing films to promote the political right, uncovering Anthony Weiner's sexting habit, exploiting the birther controversy around President Obama, bedeviling Democratic contender Hillary Clinton.
You have to understand how the Clintons who proclaim that they support all your values essentially have sold you out for money.
But Bannon's aggressive use of the Brietbart brand is under renewed scrutiny. Civil rights groups point to those incendiary headlines as evidence Bannon is pushing a white supremacist alt-right agenda, while his allies brush the complaints aside.
And they now want to come back and say that anything anybody ever published in Brietbart is Steve Bannon. That's baloney.
With his role in the government only loosely defined, it's hard to guess at his impact, but this is undeniably a heady time for Bannon. After years of sniping at the government from the outside, he is now as inside as anyone can be.
Rome, the eternal city, seat of the most powerful religious figure in the world. Pope Francis is the 266th pontiff, and he leads the Catholic Church's 1.2 billion followers. But he's a new kind of pope, a humble Latin American Jesuit more devoted to the poor than the royal pomp and circumstance that comes with the throne of St. Peter. And that's convinced some powerful critics that the Holy Father is a left-wing liberal. And they're coming for him. Led by, of all people, an American who loves upsetting the established order.
The administrative apparatus of the church has to be changed. They even admitted they need help, right? I would love, and I'm rallying people, lay people today in the United States.
Why is Steve Bannon now taking reforming the Vatican, reforming the papacy as a mission?
Not reforming the papacy, because nobody else has stepped up to do it.
President Trump's former campaign chairman, Steve Bannon, is on a new crusade.
Are you feeling confident that after you helped bring pretty significant political change to the United States, that you can also impact change here?
Absolutely. No.
His goal is to save the Catholic Church from the Pope, who he says is failed to do the big crisis facing the Church.
My problem with the day is about this crisis, pedophilia. They are not treating this as a crisis.
Another chapter in the sex abuse scandal.
The Vatican said Pope Francis has accepted Eric's resignation as the retired.
Washington, the first U.S. president of the Vatican.
The Catholic Church has been accused of covering up priests who have molested mostly young boys in a scandal which is engulfing Francis's papacy. His conservative predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, a hero of Francis's critics, even broke his silence to discuss the crisis, implying the Pope doesn't have it fully under control. Steve Bannon, a Catholic, says Francis needs to do more or risk lawsuits that will bankrupt the Vatican.
I work at Goldman Sachs. I've worked on a lot of bankruptcies, okay? The Catholic Church is heading to a financial crisis that will lead to a bankruptcy. And once that's gone, we've blown through 2 millennia of kind of real estate and savings. It could actually bring down not the theology, not the teachings, not the community of the Catholic Church, but the physical and financial apparatus of this church.
But Pope Francis has pledged zero tolerance for sex offenders in the church.
He has acted. He has listened to victims and survivors. I'm actually a survivor of sexual abuse myself. So I look to his leadership with some hope.
John Carr teaches theology at Georgetown University. He says the Pope's critics are using the sex abuse crisis as cover.
They weaponize the sexual abuse crisis to try and undermine his authority, his leadership, and the affection people have for him as Pope.
While the Vatican is a new ground for Bannon, he says it's all part of God's plan, the same one that helped President Trump into the White House.
Divine providence allowed us to win the 2016, to draw the inside straight that we had to draw in the upper Midwest. That was
Divine providence.
That was divine providence. Absolutely.
Do you really believe that Trump was put in the White House because of divine intervention?
Divine providence. Divine providence looked on us and we drew an inside straight, and that's why Donald Trump's there. No doubt.
You really believe this?
I 100% believe it. He's a very imperfect instrument, but he's an instrument. And he's
of God.
He's an instrument, yes, of divine providence, yes.
There are crazy people and there are religious crazy people.
Father Jim Martin runs America Magazine, an influential Catholic journal based in New York City.
Religious crazy people are crazier than the crazy people because they think they have God on their sides.
He says the opposition to the Pope is part of a wave of authoritarian, nationalist, populist movements that are rising around the world.
If you're against migrants and refugees and you don't think they have any rights in the world, then someone who is reaching out to them, that's going to upset you. More specifically, they don't like LGBT people, they don't like people of color, they don't seem to like the poor very much, even though Jesus spent most of his time with them in the Gospel. So, and they really don't like Pope Francis.
How big is this campaign?
It's pretty big. You know, it has a lot of money, it has sort of media organs, and it's worldwide now. It's kind of shocking.
What's the connection between the alt-right, the Brietbarts, the Steve Bannons, and this movement?
It's the same tactics, if not the same people. And so the tactics are personal vilification, demonization of individuals and groups, lies, and these kind of relentless campaigns against people that just don't let up.
Father Martin is often on the receiving end of those attacks, but says he is not the real target.
People feel that they can't attack Pope Francis, they attack me instead.
After 49 partygoers were massacred at a gay nightclub in Orlando, Father Martin wrote a book with the blessing of the Vatican, calling for the church to start building bridges to the LGBT community.
And then the pushback happened. And that was primarily online, sort of personal vilification, name-calling, heretic, sodomite, pansy, faggot, apostate, false priests, et cetera, et cetera.
You get these kind of messages, what, every day?
Daily. And then these are promoted by websites like Church Militant.
So we went to see Church Militant. It's run from a small building outside Detroit.
This is our chapel.
Michael Voris, a former local television reporter, is the editor of this ultra-Catholic website and has strong views on Francis.
Pope Francis, Holy Father, for the salvation of your own soul, you must step down from the chair of Peter and do so immediately.
The high-tech studio here churns out online shows that Voris says reach 3 million viewers a month. His message? That the Vatican is falling apart.
It's like the sewer has backwashed into the church. Okay, time to take out the buckets and start getting it out. The Vatican swamp. Well, my goodness, he hasn't drained it. He's filled it up more. So I'm just saying, be Pope, and drain the swamp.
But Voris claims the Pope can't do that because he's secretly being manipulated.
There's this big gay network running the Vatican, and just one thing after another after another
Do you believe
another.
that? Do you believe there's a gay network running the Vatican?
Absolutely.
What does that mean, even?
That they are homosexual or homosexual friendly cardinals and archbishops who have a lot of say over how things get portrayed, what the agendas are.
So you think the people around him are trying to push a gay agenda?
Absolutely. I don't think they're trying. I think they're being very successful.
While church militant is on the extreme end, senior clergy have also mobilized against Francis. American Cardinal Raymond Burke is one of 4 cardinals to issue an almost unheard of call for the Pope to resign.
And so these same people who said you always have to agree with the Pope and any disagreement with the Pope is like dissent are now like basically crapping all over Pope Francis.
Traditionally, the Pope is said to be infallible, his rulings not to be questioned. But that's changing. And Steve Bannon capitalizing on a broad spectrum of opposition, from disillusioned priests to online agitators to free marketeers who think the Pope is bad for business.
You know, if we're concerned about people who are hungry, you have to know how to produce food. That requires business, it requires industry, it requires multinational corporations.
Father Robert Sirico is president of the Acton Institute in Grand Rapids, Michigan, an organization which promotes combining capitalism with Christian values. He believes that deep down, the Pope is basically a socialist.
The background of Francis in Argentina in some way influenced him. He saw business people, crony capitalists, who were in collusion with the government, and that his dominant understanding of what business is, selfish, doing things to benefit only themselves rather than the poor. So I can understand his sympathies and his sensitivities.
So is that the basic issue with Pope Francis that you have, that he's doesn't get wealthy people?
I think that's in good part my concern about him.
While Bannon shares the same concerns, the soft-spoken Father Sirico says they're not working together.
I don't identify with Steve Bannon. I've never met him. He's not my cup of tea. That's not our approach. It really isn't. I'm not hiding any affiliation with the group. I really don't know them.
Which was more than a little surprising to hear. Working with an innovative team at Source Material, we discovered that Acton sent a letter urging the Italian government to support a group Steve Bannon is deeply involved in. The Dignitates Humanae Institute. Latin for human dignity.
This is a letter that your Rome office wrote to support the...
I didn't know about this.
Dignitates Humanae.
I didn't know about this.
You didn't approve this
I did not.
letter.
That's
you didn't
the first
approve this liaison.
It was our Rome office that did that. I really wasn't involved in it. I don't know. It's the first time I've seen that letter.
In a follow-up email, Father Sirico told us that Acton has no formal or informal relationship with Steve Bannon, although it has cooperated on a number of projects with his institute in the past. To see what Dignitates Humanae is all about, I drove 70 miles outside Rome, where, on an isolated hilltop, Bannon is setting up his grand headquarters. Bannon says he's spending about $1 million of his own money to lease and restore this 800-year-old monastery for the next 19 years.
Bannon plans to build an apartment for himself here and live here part of the year in this monastery of Bannonism. He wanted to change America first, now the Pope and beyond.
The plan is to turn this into a school for the next generation of populist leaders from all over the world.
I think a lot of these, what you call the populist national sovereignty movement, is about the reinforcing of the traditional kind of Judeo-Christian West and the values that made us unique. What we're saying is that let's have an academy that brings the best thinkers together, and it can actually train what we call modern gladiators.
Gladiators for Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah, well, here's why.
Sounds terrifying.
No, it shouldn't.
But there have already been protests. The neighbors from the nearby village sang anti-fascist songs as they marched to the monastery. Not exactly a warm welcome. Bannon doesn't appreciate being called a fascist. He prefers populist nationalist. And this Pope, he says, is on the wrong side of history.
He's constantly coming back and putting all the faults in the world on this populist nationalist movement. I mean, he's really identified this movement as the driver of, unlimited problems in Europe and North America.
So you're saying that he has an issue with your movement?
Oh, he does. I mean, look, he preaches all around Europe that the single biggest driver of problems in the world today is this populist nationalist sovereignty movement.
Maybe he's right. Maybe these right-wing movements are a problem.
Absolutely nonsense.
Bannon spends much of his time in Italy these days, where he's recognized so often, he stops to sign autographs and travels with a bodyguard. And he's just getting started.
There are people who are going to see this and think, oh no, Steve Bannon, the guy who helped put Trump in the White House, now has his sights set on the Vatican.
Why would they think?
This guy just stop? Because it's true. Because that's what you're doing. You're trying to bring change to this institution.
This institution needs change. This institution is in decline. I think people will say that.
Have you had any reaction from the Vatican to all these efforts? Has the Pope, anyone in his office, contacted you?
No. But
said, let's talk.
But I've had an outpouring of people, of lay people, particularly lawyers, bankers, others say, hey, how do we help in the United States? Who should we talk to? How do we get organized? And I'm starting that process of sitting down with people and saying, hey, here's what I think we got to do.
So this is just the beginning?
Oh, this is very beginning. Very beginning. This is going to take years.